I can remember, being ready, wanting to do my best and all that, and doing my little thing. Two things. Pearsall,
Um,
Pearsall, Pearsall was late for the bus, so Dave left him. So he walked to the pool. Okay,
No way.
not shooken up at
Normal.
all that day. Not shooken up at all. Rolls right in, gets into warm up. Uh, right before we're called to the ready room, Dave's like, Pearsall, the ready room, and he's in there playing with like friends, dunking them under the water and stuff. This is right before the race.
Podcast, where we aim to highlight inspiring people doing amazing things in the Swim Strong family and in the greater swim community. I'm here with world record holder Aaron Piersol, 3-time Olympian, 7-time Olympic medalist, and also Coach Bobby Brewer, 10-time USA national team member, U.S. national champion in the 100 backstroke in 1998, multi-time SEC champion and All-American. Swimming royalty here on this podcast. Super grateful for your guys' time, and we got some amazing stuff to dive into. But before we do that, we got to hit our rapid-fire questions. Are you guys ready?
Ready.
All right, here we go. We'll go Aaron, then Bobby. We'll see how quick you can rip them off. First question. If you could have any superpower, what would you choose?
Teleportation.
Flight. I want to fly.
I like it. That was quick. If you weren't a swimmer, what sport would you have done?
Water polo.
All right.
Baseball.
Baseball. What position?
Second base.
Second base. Okay. What's your favorite movie of all time?
Oh.
All right. I'll throw out Fistful of Dollars.
Fistful of Dollars. I need to see that.
Step Brothers.
Yes. All right. So if you guys were stuck on a deserted island and you could only pick 2 people to survive with from former national team members that you swam with, or I'll let you go all the way back to college if you want, UT for Aaron, Georgia for Bobby, you can pick 2 people. Who gives you the best chance of survival?
Best chance for survival, man.
Okay. Here we go. Oh gosh, that's an interesting one. I'm like trying to dig back a little bit. I'm gonna say who's very industrious. I'll say something tells me to go for someone like a Mike Barrowman or something like that. Isn't he living in like the Caymans right now? He's off on an island right now. There you go.
Yes.
And then
That's a good choice.
so that halfway there, and then I'll say, I need some humor, some entertainment. So
Yes.
maybe I'll go with who's the consummate funny man. Oh my goodness, right? It's been a long time.
It's too many.
What's that?
I said there's too many probably over the course of your career.
I know. This is a rapid fire thing, isn't it? Well,
Come on, man.
come on. Okay, I'll just come up with a random name. How about my goodness, someone who's level-headed. How about Peter Vanderkay?
There you go. I like it. Bobby's pointing.
I mean, Bobby is right here. Actually, I was gonna do that, but that's too easy.
I had way too much time to think about it, so mine's going to be way better, man. But listen, I don't know him. I don't know anything about him. I don't think I've ever met him, but I'm choosing Larson Jensen because he's a Navy SEAL.
Okay.
Right? I mean,
That makes sense.
that's my most likely to be able to survive. And then I thought the exact same as you, Aaron. I got to have somebody to make me laugh and keep me going. And there's no better than my boy Atiba Wade from the University of Georgia, funniest man on the planet. I got to have him out there making me laugh. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Good
All
one.
right. So how about your favorite pool that you've ever swam at, Aaron?
Oh, I think that's a good question. Off the top of my head, the white marble block pool in Rome, Italy, that Mussolini built.
That's awesome.
basically from the 1930s. Has mosaics and all
Wow.
of archers and javelin throwers and things like that on the side. It's so heavy that one side sank. Actually,
Really?
yeah, it's actually like it's not level. So
Wow.
one side the water's almost going over, other side you can't even get out of the water. That's a cool pool. That was our warm up pool for World Championships.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Bobby, how about you?
I'm gonna get trouble because you're not supposed to be in there at all. But the War Memorial in Honolulu.
Oh, good one.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's in the ocean. It's built in the ocean.
We've
And
all
you're not
done it.
supposed to swim in there, but you can get in there if you know somebody. Okay, yeah. So it's not just me, but yeah, by far, just got the most history. It's the most amazing location. It's amazing. Yeah,
That's a good
That was
one.
awesome. All right, last but not least, what is your current walkout song if you had to choose one?
Ooh. She Sells Sanctuary by The Cult.
There you go. There you go, Bobby.
Rage Against the Machine. Pretty much anything by Rage Against the Machine.
Any song by Rage. I like
Freedom,
Totally.
Freedom, probably by Rage Against the Machine. Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
That's
a
good.
one.
That's
I'm
good
gonna
stuff,
talk up
guys.
right now.
Well, guys, you did awesome with those rapid fire. Some of those are harder than others. I know especially when you think about the deserted island one is super challenging.
Yeah, that's
Some
I'd be
people.
I'm screwed.
I feel like I nailed it. I mean, I don't know that guy, but come on, he's built to survive. So.
Really good, man. Well, I'm really thankful for your guys' time on here. Super grateful for coming on here, being willing to share your stories and dive into some things. We really love having people on here who have an inspiring story. For you guys, that's both in and out of the water. I think your journey is super unique compared to a lot of people in the sport. And so I just want to start with a little bit of background, and we could just stay in the same order we did with the rapid fire there. But Aaron, would you mind sharing just how you got into the sport in the first place, why you chose swimming and fell in love with the sport, just kind of the beginnings of your career?
You bet. I hope my connection is okay. Can you guys?
It's good.
Am I coming through? Okay.
You're good.
So I come from a family of people who just really like being around the water. I guess the story goes I learned how to swim before I could walk. I just thrown in the water at a very young age and early, and it was not an unusual thing for my family. I had a grandfather who swam in college, a grandmother who was like a mermaid, literally, and both parents swam, but not competitively. But father also is a surfer, and parents are around the ocean. And so it was centered around that and just kind of the lifestyle of being around that. My sister also did it too. And so I was probably on a swim team starting at probably the first you could probably do it at 5 years old at a YMCA. And I never really left it after that. I did a bunch of other sports, for many, many years, kind of playing with a bunch of other things, but had a proclivity towards swimming, was always halfway decent, or at least I thought I was and pretended to be. Thought I was better than I actually was, and learned all the tricks at a young age of how to get out of practice early and that kind of thing. But just to begin I started taking swimming somewhat seriously relatively young at age 10, honestly.
Okay.
But part of that I think was because I moved teams to a kind of a more foundational or a more professional, let's say, club team, the Irvine Nova Aquatics, and grew up in Southern California. And I broke like a Southern California swimming record at the age of 10. And I kind of started off, I think, in a way where would scare a lot of coaches and parents and people to a degree where historically speaking, if precedent says anything, you don't want your kid to be too good at 10 years old.
Yeah, it seems like
You know,
sometimes.
that was kind of like, yeah, that was kind of the red flags that were going up. But I never looked at it that way for myself, and
Mhm.
never had the issue of that. But
Yeah. That's interesting because I do think that people have that mindset a lot of times. Like, oh, you don't want to be too good when you're young because then you won't, that you'll burn out or you'll get like, you'll get tired of the sport or you'll peak too early or something like that. And it's like, if you're good, you're good. And it's totally okay. Like, as long as you're loving the sport and doing the right things. And for you, was it like when you were good that young, was there a certain amount of pressure that you felt or were you pretty easy to like, hey, I just broke a record and, uh, but I'm nothing has changed in my mind, or what was that like mentally for you as a young kid?
it was motivating. And I think there's a bit of a reinforcing factor when, especially when you're a kid, but when you're doing anything, if you're doing somewhat well at something, there's something somewhat inherently, intrinsically kind of motivating about that. It invites you back,
Hmm.
and so I found that I enjoyed this kind of cycle of preparing for something and doing it and finding a result, and the result was something that I was really proud of, and it just kind of started to snowball,
Hmm.
and then and so but every year, every even year thereafter, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18,
Mhm.
I was breaking national records, and so
Mhm.
I developed these goals. I opened up when I was, probably before 10, I'd opened up these little Southern California national records and books and things like that. And I would study what those were. So I did, I literally would highlight and study. And I
That's
became
awesome.
somewhat of a student of it. At
Hmm.
a young age, I was really interested. I looked back at the past swimmers as well, kind of the history of the sport. I just kind of developed an interest or a fascination in it.
That's awesome.
Growing up in Southern California, the proximity to people that you're able to kind of be in proximity to, I suppose, that have gone and done these things either presently or in the past. You're uh, the access to that is much easier too. It's less opaque. It's right in your face.
Hmm.
There's a reality to it.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and then Bobby came around, and then it was all downhill for me.
That's a
Now,
Chill,
that's
bad stuff.
well,
the fun thing is, and I think this is something which is so fun for me in particular to be doing this with you, with Bobby, with you, Eric, is because like Bobby and I have had a couple of different lives together, but the first life we had together was Bobby as like an older brother. And in a lot
hmm.
of ways he is. And so, there's this gap between us age wise, but when I was 15 years old, Bobby came in from being a post collegiate athlete, and we shared the same stroke, and you in your summary in your of Bobby, you forgot to mention he was a national age group record holder in the
Yes.
100 backstroke,
Yes.
and that I broke that, but he never actually failed to remind me that he did it with a hand touch turn too, and which I found so super
To the
cool and
national.
fascinating. And that's how old we are, and that's how old Bob. And
That's awesome,
you know,
man.
but the fun thing about that, for me, with all of this, is that I had, again, back to that proximity. I had really good people to look up to. Bobby
Mm.
came on the team, and I was I was a young punk, 15 years old, and very green, and Bobby was a consummate professional, like vying for very specific thing at the national international level. And
Mhm.
so I, through osmosis, was around some guys with like Bobby, but Bobby in particular, that was incredibly inspiring, and there's a mentorship role which is integral with that.
That's awesome.
So anyway, that's part of the fun about this for me. The developmental
Yeah.
part of it is real for me, from being at that age and having somebody older who I could look up to with that.
Yeah. That's
It's very
amazing. It's cool to hear, and the national age group record story is hilarious. And I'm curious, Bobby, just from going back to the beginning of your swimming days, what was that like for you? So you coming up into the sport, choosing swimming, and then talking about weaving that into your first impression of Aaron.
So we have such similar stories. It's almost insane. It's why we probably connected. But it's interesting to me to point this out before I go into that, because it's so similar all the way through. And yet I never made an Olympic team. And I think it's important to realize that Aaron and I tell all the same stories. We had all the same experiences. And it's true, he has a lot of medals, but I did get all the same experience. Not everybody's going to be an Olympian, right? But we share all those things in common through the sport of swimming. And so I think, other than the actual chunk of gold, I got all the same stuff, right? So I think that's important to say, but it really is the same story. My mom was she ran a swim school out of our backyard, and so I was always around swimming. My sister swam. I joined the team super early. Same thing. And as a coach, you guys were kind of speaking briefly about you're always worried about the kid that is too fast too early. But I was that kid too. Exact same as Aaron. I was studying the Georgia record books and looking, all these Chaz Morton was the name because he held every single national record ever. So Chaz Morton, I was zeroed in on. I wanted that, and I wanted Georgia records, and I knew all that kind of stuff. And I hit it early, and it is very rewarding. But the difference is, from a coach perspective, is you could tell the difference based on the parents. The kid who's stressed out and the parents are pushing him, and he's good really early, just not going to happen. The kid's just having a good time and happens to be really fast. Those are the future Aaron Piersols and Michael Phelpses or whatever. At that age, I was that guy also. And I was all in 10, 11 years old, state records. I started, I think at 11 years old, I said, I'm not going to eat sugar anymore. I stopped eating like white sugar, white flour, no sodas from that point. The last time I had a soda in my entire life was when I was 7 years old. So it even started earlier than that. But at 11, I was fully committed, all in.
Wow.
And it was just what I did, right? So I think my first national record was at 13, and then I made the national team. Well, the national junior team. I was on the first junior team at 14. So I was traveling around the world by the time I was 14. What a great life that was, coming out of little Forest Park, Georgia. But yeah, I had the opposite situation in that I got lucky, man. I got a coach that trained under Don Gambrell, who was the ultimate coach of all time at Alabama way, way back when. Just a real, guru, old-fashioned, unbelievable mentor. But he trained with him, learned so much, and came to me. But I was kind of, we were such a small team. There were probably 40 people on the team. We were the outcast. It was always me and my coach at nationals, and that was it. But because of that, the opposite of Aaron, he was around it all the time. I was not around it. I didn't know any better. I showed up at junior nationals, the youngest kid there at 13, and my coach is like, "Well, are you going to come watch tonight?" And I'm like, "I didn't come here to watch." And I made finals because I just thought, what's what you do? He told me I got to make finals. I got to make finals. Okay. And so kind of had the opposite of that, but kind of naive all the way through. But the same thing, breaking records, all that. Went to college, got lucky enough to sign a contract after college, went out there, and I'll tell you the story of the first day I went on deck. So I'm flying out there. It's exhausting because I think I was broke. And I fly out on Southwest on coupons, and I had to hit like 5 different cities to get to there. And then another national team guy, Steve West, comes and picks me up like an hour away because I couldn't get into the local airport. But anyway, all that, and I finally get to practice. And I walk out on deck, and I'm like, I can't get in today, Coach. This is exhausting. But I'm sitting there watching, and there's 3, not 1, 3 14, 15-year-old guys going a set of 200 backstrokes. And I'm going to add this so that the legend's not too much for people to handle. But I think it's true. I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure you guys were wearing paddles and fins. It would have been Zoomers and the tiny little blue Speedo paddles, little squares. Even if you were, all 3 of those guys were holding 147s, 200 backstroke. And they did just 4 or 5, just cranking them out.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, okay, I'm in the right spot, and Salo's like, 147. Listen, Peirsol, it just nothing, like it was nothing, just rolling through it. And I was jaw dropped when I got there. And so, I kind of the opposite, having a mentor around, also being the mentor is amazing. You don't really know something until you can teach it, right? And I can remember a day where Dave pulled me aside and said, "Hey, can you take this kid and just work on his starts? We got to do something with his starts. You've been working on a lot. Take him over there." And we did, and he just picked it up like that. And it was, I think, a couple weeks after that, we ended up in finals together, and he broke that record right next to me in the lane next to me, and I was
Wow.
very proud of that. I did remind him immediately that I had to touch the wall and you got to flip, but
Different.
I was really glad it went to him, because at that time that was like a 10-year-old record. It stood for a long time, and even with
Mhm.
the hand touch it stood. So I was proud of that one, but I was glad it was broken by him,
That's
and
awesome.
we took off from there, man. We took off from there. We've been friends and mentored each other and helped each other out ever since.
No, those stories are pretty amazing, and how they're connected and the similarities is pretty uncanny, actually. I want to ask you guys both, since you both had a similar situation where you were breaking records at a really young age and really loved the sport. We're studying the sport. We're studying records. A lot of people would say, like, don't do stuff like that. And you guys were just like eating it
Mm,
up, it sounded like, and it didn't do anything but fuel you,
mm.
because it sounds like something you wanted to do. Can you guys talk a little bit about your mindset, like, and how you handle pressure on the bigger stages? So, you won a national championship, Bobby, multiple SEC championships, were in line to swim for USA and at the Olympic trials before an unfortunate accident. And then Aaron going to the Olympic Games at age 17 and going as a kid. I mean, it's got to be a bit terrifying, all those experiences for you guys stepping up on that national stage, you would think. Did you do things as a kid to prepare your mind for
Can,
those situations, or
can,
what was that?
let me answer this one first before
Yeah,
he says anything,
go
okay?
ahead.
Because I was like that. I would visualize and I would sit before a race and, like, they called the death pose, and I was super, like, my taper was on and I was super nervous, and all I was really, really, really focused, right?
Uh-huh.
And this is where Aaron Piersol mentored me as a 15-year-old, me being a 25-year-old. I learned from him that race where he broke that national record. Two things I remember from that. Okay, it wasn't a big meet for me, but I can remember, being ready, wanting to do my best and all that, and doing my little thing. Two things. Piersol,
Um,
Piersol, Piersol was late for the bus, so Dave left him. So he walked to the pool. Okay,
No way.
not shooken
normal.
up at all that day. Not shooken up at all. Rolls right in, gets into warm up. Right before we're called to the ready room, Dave's like, "Peirsol, the ready room," and he's in there playing with, like, friends, dunking them under the water and stuff. This is right before the race,
That's
and I
amazing.
just remember, that whole team was like that. That was Dave's kind of atmosphere. It's like he
Mm-hmm.
refused to call it taper. He called it fine tuning. He refused to let them.
Mm.
They would play football on the beach before a meet. Things like, they were always loose and ready to go.
Mm.
And the idea was, what you train for. You train for what you're going to do. There's no magic. There's no pixie dust. You're just going to be able to do it. And Piersol could do stuff in practice that he would do in a meet. He was just ready. He just didn't have to worry
Mm-hmm.
about it. Me, I was levitating before my race. I mean, I really needed everything to be right and special, and I learned a lot from that, and from Piersol and from Salo on that. I don't know if you remember it that way, Piersol, but that's what I remember.
I remember well that specific moment of me being left on the bus. It's like, which one left off? It's
Yeah.
you can laugh about it now for sure, and maybe even back then. But I was notoriously flighty, very, very notoriously, kind of out in just out in space a little bit half the time. I really was. Before. I mean, as an example of that, like I never got a set right. Like it's not something I'm necessarily very proud of, but like Dave would be speaking about it, telling us a set, or a coach would tell us about a set, And as soon as a coach would tell me about a set, my mind just goes and just I start fiddling, and then it's like, oh, I guess I got to lead the lane. And so the first time, there was always this built-in kind of first 50. It's like, start over. Aaron got the set wrong. Like it's this. And it was this notorious kind of thing. No, to that point, it evolved for me, but my natural proclivity was more towards what Bobby was referring to, being very loose, to the point where, I do think that there's something to be said with this. I think what Bobby was doing is another version of what I was maybe less intentionally kind of doing, but understanding over time. That's what I was trying to do. Was I think so much of as I progressed through the national and international level, it became more and more apparent to me just how important the mind was, and how maybe to a degree that was not expounded upon enough. And no kind of practice that I really with people, generally speaking, in these big time races, I'd get to the blocks or get to the ready rooms, and ready rooms already are notoriously a terrible place. They truly are, like, they depends. They aren't for everybody. I mean, some people probably, get up for them, but I never did. And so I avoided them.
Really?
Them. I did. I avoided them. I was there. Yeah. I could go into things even like, it sounds like I'm bragging, but it's probably not. But I literally was like I'm like a reason that you're supposed to be at the ready room 20 minutes before your race. I am.
That's a humble
was,
brag. That's
yeah, that's a bad one, but that's a weird one.
No, that's great.
But they literally had to hold an Olympic final for me because I didn't go to the ready room, and they held it for me and went to commercial break, and then I showed up and I was there, and that's not necessarily something I want to say that you should go and do. It's just but the point of what I'm trying to get is into what Bobby was alluding to. I had a really good upbringing with the coaches, with the team that I was working on, and Salo did a really nice job of instilling in me and us we really were doing by the time we were getting up and racing. I got to the point where I realized I was as prepared or more, and often more than anyone else I was swimming against coming up to a race. And it was a really interesting thing to realize, but I part of it was I had a lot of trust and faith in the process that was going on, and that was given to me by this relationship that I had with my coach. I was invited into the process to a degree where there's a certain kind of and this was palpable and real. I had a lot of say over what it was that I was doing. I was engaged in a way that in a very real way, the sport from a young age was very much mine. And I was engaged in it in a way where I had feedback on sets and feedback on how I was feeling and what we were going to do and what we were not going to do. And I was given an element of agency and trust that from a young age, which I didn't know any better. We kind of understood that there were other teams where kids could be an automaton, where coaches could kind of rule with an iron fist, and you grow to see how easy that can happen, and no one to really blame for those kinds of things. But what ends up kind of unfolding over time with somebody who is I think engaged in the process day to day, leading up like for an entire year going into a meet, to a degree that they're engaged in how they're swimming a race and how they're training for a particular race. To a point where it so well to where when you get up and swim, you know how to do it backwards, forwards, with the sun in your face, and with a big sick person next to you when you're sick, when you're tired, when you're feeling great, or just every single condition under the sun. it takes a lot of the fear and the unexpectedness out of the way.
Hmm.
I also think I kind of had an inherent understanding that very, very little was in my control except for that.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of things that can take you out of a race. And one thing that I ended up learning over time was that races were often over before they began,
Hmm.
and more often than not, honestly.
Interesting. And when you say that, what do you mean by that? Typically, it's over before it begins.
It's not always the case, right? By no means. But I think, but nerves are a really interesting thing, and I don't think people spend a lot of time kind of diving into why you get nervous, and really taking an honest assessment of what it is that nerves really are, and what is it? It can be anything. Maybe it's probably it has a lot to do with your own insecurities and vulnerabilities. And the beautiful thing about sport, and the thing that I grew to develop to appreciate and admire more and more as I got older into this, was the developmental component of this, and what the stresses of something like competition actually rise in this. And they, you're not in a typical day to day, for the majority of people, you're not walking down the street, revving at 99, 100%, like getting
Right.
ready to perform something, and that,
Right.
that everything is on the line. There's, for those who know what it is to compete, it's it makes you raw. Like it literally, like whatever is inside of you is bubbling to the surface. It's literally, you cannot, it's hard to contain the things that are coming up. And so that can wear you out going into something that is, you can overthink things. You can ruminate. You can lose sleep over things. You can have already talked yourself out through doubts, and I didn't prepare well enough for this. I'm not good enough for this. Whatever myriad things that can come up. And so you can see people before races who aren't really fully prepared. And I think that one thing I came to understand was, most people that swim, especially at those higher levels, everyone's physically incredibly fit. Like everybody's been doing some semblance of a version of what you've been doing. Like the variation between that workout and this workout and various things is, I mean, you have variation, but really it's in, diet and way people are taking care of themselves. But there's all these factors, but if the mind is in a right place, and if the mind has been trained well, and the person who is going through this process has had the chance and ability to grow that part of themselves. It doesn't, you can't just, not everyone can just do it on their own. You need help. You need kind of guidance in how to understand when you are focusing on the wrong things, It's really difficult. Why, start asking yourself questions. Why are you so afraid to lose? What are you afraid of losing? Why are you so afraid of getting up there and competing? What have you got to lose?
Yeah.
And when you really start to take these questions honestly and sincerely, I was blown away by how few people actually were. Everyone brings their demons to the block, and it's that, you don't want to do that. You want to exercise those before you get there. But what I mean is, that's what the training is for. Like, honestly, I mean, you can train the body, but when you're training literally every day, it's like, train the body, fine. Like, we know how to do that. But the mind is the really interesting, dynamic, very uniquely specific to each individual component. And it's very developmental. I mean, it's raw. I can tell a story. I'm going to tell two stories real quick, and then I'm going to relinquish my time. But one is, I'm hanging out with my buddy's 7-year-old kid the other day, and I'm playing soccer with him, and he's very competitive. He's the sweetest kid, but he's very competitive. And I'm hitting the ball with him, and I'm letting him score every once in a while, but occasionally I'm kind of moving the ball around him and things like that. And I start pushing him a little bit, and he gets competitive, and he starts kind of like just like showing it, and he's like, and he starts kind of getting little sniffles and things like that. And I was thinking like, it's interesting. And his dad and I have been having conversations like, your kid's super competitive, and he's super personally, like really personally, you know. And so sport is an incredible educational tool, and through that he can learn a lot about how it is that he comes to a situation like that. And another story I want to relay, because I think it's one of the more fascinating ones that I was ever a part of, and it's a great tool to be able to manage, like at a very basic level, be able to manage nerves. I'm at a World Championships. We're in Tokyo. We're staying an hour away from the pool, and everybody is at the same hotel. Like almost like I would say probably 90% of the teams are staying at this one hotel. And it's Tokyo, and the traffic's terrible. And we're all supposed to be at the pool. The buses leave every half an hour or whatever it is. We all, in my entire heat of finals in the 100 backstroke, gets on the same bus.
Okay.
Right. All 8 of us are on the same bus going to finals. Right.
Yeah.
We all leave early. We all like it's traffic, you know, even me. I'm like, I'm on the bus. You say a lot that I'm on the bus with the other 8 guys, right? And so there's 7 guys. And so I'm on the bus with these guys. And I remember we hit terrible traffic to the point where like the clock's ticking, time's going. It's starting to eat into warm up. Like it's starting to kind of, and so like the tension on the bus becomes palpable. We're not the only ones competing that night, right? This is like, but the thing is you could, heads started to pop, just, you know, like you start seeing like, and it was interesting because when you really sit back and you watch it, you go, we're all in the same boat. The race isn't happening without us.
Yeah.
No one's getting prepared any better than the other person. Like, and so, you know, objectively speaking, it was I remember thinking like, damn, we're going to be late. But I remember thinking like, well, they're not going to hold the race without us. And I remember looking around, and all of a sudden I remember I became this like observer. I remember watching what was happening. And as I started to look around and watch what was happening, it's to this element of like a race can be over before it began. Like it really, like you start watching the things unfold, literally watching how this kind of just starts to fall. And you start to realize how important the training is, not for the body, but for the mind, and what it is that you have understanding in that particular moment, exactly what you have control over in that particular moment, and that letting go of whatever it is that you don't, is best to the best of your ability. And it takes practice, but that's what that's for. It's a long-winded way of saying it. I could go on and on about that. But it was something that I honestly feel was it was something I was proud of within my own career, and the ability to be able to manage my own stress and nerves. That said, I was not immune. Like I fell prey to those things as much as anybody, and they raised my own, you know, insecurities and issues that I realized I still had to deal with. And you're never over it. They always pop up, some weird thing over it. But it's an incredible exercise that I realize at spending time, honestly, too, with as many fantastic swimmers as I did, and as we all did. Very few. It's amazing how few really work on that. Bobby's in there meditating. Bobby's like one of the only ones going like, "Oh,
That's incredible insight. I really appreciate you sharing all of that, because very raw. It's very helpful for people to hear, like inside the mind of a champion too. And something that I'm always super interested in is the mental side of the sport, and what makes a champion tick, and what makes some of the greatest of all time great. And something that I find to be uniform across the board is that they were all able to get into this flow state where they just let their body do what it was capable of doing. And they essentially had trained their minds to a point where they could just let their mind not hold them back, like let them do what they were capable of. And it sounds like you both had very different approaches to getting to the same goal. Bobby, from your perspective, mentally, this is so interesting to me. What's kind of your perspective on that? Why did you have that type of mental focus? Where did you learn that from? What was your mindset going into big meets? What were you trying to do just to get inside the mind of another champion for everybody listening?
Yeah, I got lucky early on, and that there's a speaker named Jeff Goforth. What a great name for a motivational speaker, right?
Yeah.
And he was kind of hokey, and he had all the little tricks and stuff, but it was amazing. But it was how we didn't call it flow back then, but it's just that point where if you're in a race and you're conscious, you've lost. And I tell my swimmers this all the time. Like, if you're asking me what you need to do in the race before you walk up to the race, it's just too late. You don't need to be thinking. If you're thinking, you're gone. It's done. So, it's learning how to get into that unconscious mode, and everybody has a different way to do it. But for me, that's what I had learned was that kind of meditation. And same as Aaron, and I'm sure every other athlete, but my heart rate's going 180, miles per hour, and I'm fired up and I'm ready. I never battled the I can't do it stuff, right? Like, that just never came up. I always felt like I was there, and I never focused externally at all. And this is another thing I appreciate about Aaron. I mean, I think Aaron's a very competitive person. I think I'm competitive in some ways, and I think you would agree with this, but not once ever in my entire career was I concerned about beating someone. I was concerned about the time that I put in my head that I want to go so fast that nobody's going to be able to. It doesn't matter. I'm further ahead than everybody. It wasn't about beating somebody. It was never about that. I was happy for them. They swim fast, and that's good. So I was never concerned with the external. I was concerned about what I wanted to do and getting into that mode. So from early on, that Jeff Goforth was just, what's your process? For me, I counted everything in sevens. If I was doing my arm swings, it was in sevens, and I would take my brain into it. And then I had my death pose, right? Like, that's just where I go. But I would literally be levitating and had a very specific meditative process that I went through. My story like that was actually when I broke that national record that Aaron broke. That morning was at nationals, and I cruised it. I know everybody has that, the one that got away, but I had cruised that. I was ready for finals. I was going to go way so much. I was going to go so much faster. I was only 16, and I was guaranteed in my mind I'm making the world championship team. I got this. And I go to the ready room. I'm not a big fan of ready rooms either. I go to the ready room, and I won't say his name, but it was an Olympian. Goes, wow, broke that record this morning. You're in finals, and you're probably going to make world championships. Like, you're only 16 years old. He's like, I remember my first finals at nationals. I slipped on the start. Guess what happened to me?
No.
I slipped on the start. Yeah, I slipped on the start, and I did not make the world championship team, and I did not break that record further like I wanted. And that was it was rude. It was cruel, but it worked. And he made it. I didn't. And,
wow.
And I will always remember that as an external factor. Like, I let an external factor come into play, and you just have to be, you got to let all that, it's just, none of that can matter. Right. But I will say this, dude, in learning that, it always worked for me, but in seeing the way that Dave taught these guys how to do it and how they did it, there's so much value in staying. I know you're getting to the same goal, but there's so much value in being able to stay light. There's so much value in it's also a different kind of training. It's not just the mindset. It was a different kind of training. It was a training to go fast every single freaking day. That these kids were doing it in practice. And so just all around a different mindset to the point you get up there, and it's just another day. There's nothing. Yeah. I'm gonna do what I did in practice, right? So kind of learning that part of it too. And one of the most important lessons that Salo gave to me was every time something came up and I was stressed out, he would just, and you could just sincerely meant it. He would say, "It's just swimming. Just who cares, Bobby? Who cares? It's just swimming. And I'm like, this is coming from this coach whose entire life is he has nothing else in his life other than swimming, swim, swim, swim. And he's telling me it's just swimming, and I that always resonated well with me. That was a wonderful lesson and important.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
And a great.
keeping
Go
it
ahead.
irreverent.
What's that?
Oh, just keeping it irreverent, being irreverent. Really,
Yes, absolutely. Well, and it's got to be fun. It has to be fun. The number one thing, I think we all probably at some point in our careers went through this, but at some point it wasn't fun anymore, right? And I love the book by Sean Accor, The Happiness Advantage, but he just talks about the main point is that we say, okay, you're going to work hard and you're going to be successful, and when you're successful, then you'll be happy. And in all the research, it shows it's the exact opposite. If you're happy, you're able to work harder, which leads to success. And that is probably the most important foundation of my coaching now is I got to have happy athletes going to be fast athletes.
That's so good. You guys are bringing so much light to this issue that I hope kids around the world are listening to this and taking this to heart, and coaches, because we need it too as coaches to be able to create that culture to where the kids can find that happiness and realize that it is just swimming. Like if you break it down to its simplest form, like you're moving up and down a body of water and someone's clicking a time, like it's not that serious, but obviously there's so much more to it for us, the value of it because of all the life lessons we learn and all that. But it is really just swimming at the end of the day. And why did you start? Because you loved it. And that's what you were mentioning there, Bobby, and the irreverence, Aaron, that you were talking about. Those things are so insightful that if people would take the time to think about it. And Aaron, you mentioned something too about being willing to face your insecurities, like those things, whether you were knowingly or unknowingly approaching those head on when you were younger, that's something people are terrified of, like looking at your insecurities in the face and being able to say, I'm insecure about XYZ. We don't want to show that. We don't want to feel that. We don't want to deal with that. And it sounds like you were like, here's an insecurity, but what's the root of it? And let me break this down a little bit and see if it's even worth allowing it to be in my mind space. I don't know if that's an accurate depiction of what you were saying, but that's kind of what I was getting from that.
Yeah. I mean, I had some, I was bludgeoned over the head a couple of times with that. I kind of almost by design, right? And I think those are great points. And so this element of, like Bobby, you were mentioning what you weren't focused too much like externally. At one point I realized unintentionally, like I was like, at this point, I'm a world record holder. I had some kind of, I think developed maybe some kind of attachment to this particular event, this 200 backstroke. And I remember, I think Ryan Lochte gave me probably one of the best gifts he could have ever given me, but was by, swimming against me and beating me. And I hadn't really been beaten on that level at that time. And I don't know, something like 5 or 6 or 7 years.
Wow.
And so I very unintentionally, I mean, in an effort to move things forward and to try and stay motivated, I took a kind of ownership over this thing. See, a fictional kind of irrational ownership over this thing. And so he took it away. And what it showed me was I was, for one, there's a certain kind of expectation I had put on myself to win. I'd won for 7 years prior. Right. And so, what it forced me to do and go back to was like, same kind of thing. Okay. Obviously not a great way to like go into a race. It was to like, put all the chips on, like, winning every single time, all the time, especially to make you happy kind of thing, and it's like, okay, duly noted, like, cut you back down again, because you need to. And, I grew to understand sport in general. Let's say swimming for us, but sport is good at this. And but really anything a kid puts a lot of time into, it can be, I don't know, it can be something like theater or art, or, I think in anything, we've all seen like Black Swan, right? Or something, or version, maybe we haven't, but just the, the darker side of, or that movie Whiplash. I don't know if you've seen that movie Whiplash, for the jazz musicians, right? And you walk on a razor's edge trying to flirt with, let's say, a version of like mastery, I guess. You can. And so the things that are really hardest to maintain are also the most important things to maintain. I grew to understand that maybe the most important thing to maintain in a career was perspective. And that so going back to that element of like irreverence, let's say, or and we all put an emphasis on different things, I guess. And I wanted to be consistent. It wasn't necessarily, I had individual goals, but I just wanted to be consistent, and I wanted to try to do everything I could in order to do that. But the point was I had to learn how to overcome as I got older, I'll say this, and as I got further into the sport at a professional level, weirder and more difficult things to deal with were popping up. And a lot of that was some expectations, right? Or just setting a new precedence and new things kind of moving forward. And it was a constant check on your character, really. And it was a constant, it was constantly requiring you to step up and asking you how you were going to react or respond to this particular little new novel experience that was in front of your face, or that's something that you're going to have to deal with. And I agree to see it as an educational tool. I know that it always has been an educational tool. Sport was. But I began to understand it. Actually, that's what it is. And, we get caught up. People can get caught up in going fast and doing those kinds of things. But going back to what Bobby was acknowledging earlier, and I think this is something that I think Bobby and I think it's something that ideologically speaking ties us together very closely, in a sense that we have a similar worldview, is this element of understanding that if we really have a good idea of why it is we're doing what we're doing and we enjoy it, we're going to put in the time and the effort, the performance, or that whatever it is, the good stuff that is that little dopamine hit of like winning or accomplish some goal does come, right? Yeah. And but you have to have these foundational things, which are the hardest things to be able to maintain. And so much of it is, it's all in the head, and it's all in perspective, and it's all in that. It's an understanding the process of what it is that you're doing. It's swimming. There are no shortcuts. It's not easy. Yeah. It's a journey. It takes time. It's very slow. You better enjoy it, and you better enjoy that, right? You better enjoy that kind of 99% chunk of what it is you're actually spending your time doing. And so it's this beautiful it's an educational tool, really. At the end of the day, it's where we grow.
That is so interesting to hear you say the most important tool is perspective, and it was just essentially a mindset. Like, you get to choose how you view different situations, and being able to understand, hey, this is what's happening in my body. When I win, this little dopamine hit comes, but like, let's not get too high let's focus on like the bigger picture, why we're doing this, the bigger picture. And I think that's so good for coaches, athletes, parents alike to hear and really implement. And I feel like for both of you guys too, it definitely adds up to how you guys have become two of the greatest in this sport that we've seen, backstroke wise and just in general swimming wise. And how you guys have had very eerily similar paths in different ways, and both been on the national and international stage. And I think it's pretty awesome to hear how your mindset developed over that time. And this is a bit of shifting gears if you guys have time for it, but there's so many things we could dive into, being national record holders, being on the national team, setting world records, Olympics, NCAA. Like, there's so many things you guys have done in the pool, but what I think is so intriguing outside of the mindset is also how you guys have moved the sport forward and things you've done in your career, even outside of the water too, which I think a lot of swimmers struggle with. This goes back to your perspective. When I finish swimming, who am I? Is the question a lot of people ask themselves. And it's pretty interesting how you guys knew each other from a younger age, but then with Premier Management, which I think was pretty forward thinking at the time, an agency. Bobby, you're the vice president of it. I know Aaron was one of the athletes you worked with, along with many other really significant athletes. And I'm just wondering, like, if you guys could talk a little bit about how your mindset tied into that experience, what you guys were trying to do with that, because you don't really hear of many like swimming agents. That's something more you hear in NBA, NFL, baseball. Like, these are the so what was the vision behind that? How did you guys end up working together in that? What was the mindset? I'm just curious around.
So PMG was started by Evan Morgenstein, who was a basketball agent at the time, and met Josh Davis at a trade show sitting in a hot tub, and his agent would never call him back. And Evan signed him, and he starts kind of researching the sport of swimming. I think he showed up at probably his first couple swim meets in a suit and tie and thought, okay, this ain't going to work, and started to figure out the sport. But at that time, in 1992, you'd had the Dream Team, right? And so the first professional athletes in the Olympics, and it opened up from that. But nobody even knew, what professional Olympians mean. Most people thought that you couldn't even make money still. So going in, it was actually coming out of 96 is when that was. So there were a couple sort of trailblazers, Matt Biondi, Tom Jager, Tom Dolan, some guys like that had sponsorships going into 96, but it was really rare. Coming out of 96, I got signed. A lot of us, there's names you wouldn't even recognize now, but they signed, and we actually started making money. I was making more money than my parents were at the time. And I mean, I was probably eighth in the world at the time or something, like maybe sixth, something like that. But there became a middle class of swimming, and that was Evan. Evan did that in the beginning. And he started signing folks like me, and suddenly he created all these ways that nobody else was doing to get out there and make money. So he was calling the sponsors. He was getting them interested in the sport of swimming. And he did create the largest swim clinic company at the time in the business. And so we were all out there on the road actually making money, which was crazy. And it just kept taking off. And then you had Phelps, right? Mm-hmm. Phelps comes into play and people start getting interested. It continues to build. And then you got all these people coming along with Phelps. You got Piersol and Eric Venn and Brendan Hansen and Caitlin Sand and all these, Amanda Beard, all these names starting to build up. And then, kind of perfect storm, we suddenly get announced that Beijing is going to host the Olympics. And everybody got really excited about that because that was the market that every major corporation wanted to be in, right? Nobody could do it bigger than Beijing. Everybody was finally opening up. We're going to throw a lot of money into that. So even the conversation back in 2001 when they announced it was headed towards Beijing. And as agents, I was then at that point an agent. I started working with Evan after I retired in 2000. We could get a sponsorship for anybody. There's plenty of work for everybody. So you had that, Beijing comes on, and then the suits. The suits go from costing $50 to $600 all at once. Bam. And it just took off. Suddenly there's a ton of money in the sport. Okay. And then comes the Phelps thing. So you have the three things, the Phelps interest, suddenly swimming became the top priority for the broadcast at the Olympics. It became, the number one Olympic sport. He became the number one Olympic athlete in 2004, all that kind of stuff. So all these things are taking off. Nike jumps into the sport, which was at the time, sat down with Nike. We had a great relationship. They said, we're gonna work with your athletes, and it was Aaron, Brendan, Jason Lezak, and that was a huge turning point in the sport. Nobody had ever paid athletes as much as Nike was going to pay them, and that became the standard suddenly, right? So you got the suits, you got new companies coming in, you got all these big athletes coming up, and there was some staying power now because these athletes that were at 2000 were also at 2004 and planning on going to 2008. You had brand recognition between each athlete. Evan and I were taking those athletes and treating them like real professional athletes and creating a brand around them. So all my athletes had to be associated with a charity, something that they cared about. They needed multiple sponsorships. They needed a speech that they really cared about, that they could, get out there and talk about it. It was a program, and we developed them, and that just really took off. It really, really took off. We had a middle class of swimming. These athletes were making, many of them were millionaires. When I first started, my first athlete, luckily to sign, the best athletes in the world were probably making $100,000 a year. By the time I was done, most of them were millionaires.
Wow.
Now, that coming off of the national team, I already knew people like Aaron and Amanda Beard and Jason Lezak, so I just pulled them with me, right? I get to sign my friends and work with them, right? We all know each other. We're gonna do this. It was great. I had been through that experience, and I already knew them, so we all kind of built a team and a family up to help each other, right? And we did. I think everybody worked together to help everybody else's profile. I was able to bounce, ideas off of everybody. We all knew we wanted to build. And so we did. And the end of that, though, and the reason you don't see that anymore, was those three things, the Phelps, the Beijing, and those suits, also went away all at once. So after Beijing, I think you had a year and a half left of those suits. And I got quoted saying that there was a bubble in Olympic marketing at one point, which didn't go over well with mine. But I said that exactly. Phelps is never going to be able to do 8 gold medals again. He's already done it. Somebody's already done it. It's not happening again. The suits are going away, and it's never going to be Beijing again. You're not going to have an entire country with the second largest economy in the world hosting an Olympics, but not just hosting it, but hosting it as the country. Like they're putting all their money into it. The United States can host it, but it's still private. In Beijing, it was the whole country, right? So there's just no way anybody could ever do that. And sure enough, the bubble popped. And these athletes don't have agents anymore. I mean, some of them have agents, but it's very rare. There's no middle class of swimming anymore, so that just doesn't really exist. But we were in the golden age, and it was great. And I couldn't be more proud to have worked with the people that I worked with. They were all friends,
That's amazing.
We knew each other outside of me being their agent or whatever. And I used to tell them all the time, like, I'm not here to be your agent. I know that's fun to say, and you can say that all you want, but we're business partners. We're going to figure this thing out together. Aaron and I created our own events. Aaron Piersol's Race for the Oceans. That was the goal. We wanted to develop businesses that we could continue to do together. And that was kind of the goal through that.
That's so awesome. It is super unique, and you don't hear anything like that anymore. And Aaron, I'm wondering your perspective, being a part of that, starting from the ground up and being one of the athletes that you were working with him, and what that was like from your perspective, why you decided to do that, and how you were looking to move the sport forward too.
I mean, it was it's fun listening to Bobby talk about it, and I alluded to multiple chapters in Bobby's and my relationship earlier. You have this chapter of me being a young teenage kid, being mentored by an older swimmer, and then going into the professional element at a relatively young age of 21 years old, pretty young age, leaving college midway through NC2As, at least the competitive part of it, to go and do this. The fact that I had someone that I could trust within this, it made it so easy and simple for me. And so it was an incredible time, an incredible period where, like Bobby was saying, stars were aligned. I mean, I would have loved for it to be sustainable, but I think Bobby's right. I think there was an interesting kind of bubble where I was in the beginning of that. I remember becoming a professional athlete, but understanding quite well that we were not the the first to try and do this. The door had been knocked on for decades. And so Bobby alluded to these men and women before us who like literally had to fight tooth and nail just to be able to like pay rent.
Wow.
Right. And they were professional athletes, and so you had people like Biondi and Jaeger and Sean Jordan and Burkhoff and these guys who were coming around during that time, that in the early 90s, late 80s, who had to like boycott meets and who had to like basically kind of take the hit in a sense, right? They were the ones who and that didn't really ever stop even as we were moving forward. There were things that even us as athletes during my generation, we realized that the only way we could move forward with it was if we did it together, right? We had to kind of collectively move forward. And it was always one of the things that I'm forever grateful for about working with Bobby and then that time and Evan and PMG was this professionalism, the aspect of this, and them doing such a good job of it, but also and them looking out for us. I feel like I got a business education from that, in a sense of like what it was that we were building and doing and trying to do it real, like truly and authentically in that way, but also in a sense of really looking after your own rights. I mean, I remember like companies kind of coming in and trying to nip away at certain things. Like Samsung was using a bunch of people's this and that during like some, and they're an Olympic sponsor at the time, right? And the thing was like, if you let that go, it sets a precedent for every other company to continue to let this go. It became somewhat of a responsibility to kind of like move that bar and that boundary and hold entities accountable in a sense, so that you as the individual, the athlete, or the athletes collective can have their own space and aren't taken advantage of to a degree. It was a very fascinating platform or level one, and it's super educational. I wish it was still around for them today, for the kids, and the educational component of that, what it did for the sport. I wish it was something that could continue. Bobby, I remember, I do think you're right. I think the Phelps thing is something. I think the Beijing thing, that's interesting how you chalk it up to Beijing, but I could see that being a thing. Interestingly, if I were to put the nail in the coffin onto one thing, it was the suits. And if just at that very kind of base level, you had companies coming in that were very small companies, relatively speaking, out of their own garages, who are now up there and competing with the biggest names in the world. And now athletes that were getting paid and sponsored that were never getting that before. We could argue all day that there was a period where the suits crossed this sacred boundary that they never should have. But the knee-jerk reaction to that and the way they pulled completely back was also incredibly short-sighted. Companies, for example, that wanted to put a logo over the chest of a male athlete, right? From a suit that prior to that, we would have never argued that they were crossing that sacred boundary, that threshold of what might be considered unethical. Now that was gone. You had suits, this lack of incentive by suit companies to innovate. These companies were like throwing money at innovation, right? You had companies like Nike and Speedo, but also the other smaller companies holding these larger ones accountable. And so you had this. It was like perfect and ripe for like just rocketing, and you could cap it. Have some kind of regulation on things and holds those boundaries firm. But they pulled it back 15 years or something
Wow.
like that, in
Wow.
a sense. And by doing that, companies were just like, we're out. I feel
Yeah.
like this got so weird, so messy. There's not really much of an incentive in this anymore. And that was kind of like, after that, I never saw it really recover and rebound. That was an unfortunate thing. That said, the experience that I had outside of the sport itself during that period was we had a blast. We traveled the world. We proselytized the sport, and we got to do it in front of world leaders, and
Wow.
I know that it's still done today, but like whatever big, it's like I remember doing talks that I should never have been doing it in front of people that should never have been listening to me speak.
That's amazing.
Just thinking like, God, how did I end up here? Kind of thing. But it was the place that we found our sport in. It was this time
so
we found
cool.
our sport in this place that we could never have really dreamed, and
Hmm.
all these factors had to come together. Bobby was this integral part of actually being able to be the one to like push it through and show us how to basically get it done.
That's amazing.
Yeah, the fact that Bobby and I got to do that
There was,
together, so cool.
yeah. It was some glitz and glamour too, which made it a lot of fun. Like these guys deserve that, right? And so, I
Mhm.
mean, I can remember Aaron and I after the Olympics, and I don't know what year that would have been, maybe 2004. Like just kind of waking up in the moment, and we're on the tour bus of one of my favorite bands, and we just kind of woke up in the moment, like, oh, here we are, like, backstage, and then we're just gonna get on the tour bus with these guys and just roll on out, like, as if it's just normal, and it was just normal, it was fine, whatever, but that was fun for those guys, and they deserved it.
Yeah.
And so I was always pushing for those kind of things. So it was a lot of fun too, and I think the sport needs that, right? Because you can't develop personality without the kids looking up and seeing like, wow, look, that's really cool. Look where they are today, that kind of stuff. And that's hard to do today. I don't see it happening very much.
That's like, I mean, that is when people talk about being a professional athlete, like that's kind of the dream, right? Like you want to be able to move the sport forward. You want to be able to be supported by something you're giving your life to, right? You've given so much time, effort, energy, and passion for this sport. And so it should be able to provide a nice lifestyle for you because you've put it, you've earned your stripes, so to speak. And I'm just curious, how do you, there's got to be a way to still get that, right? Every other professional sports league, like the people who build the sport.
I'll say this, like that right before I retired, and that's what I would call it. I retired, but right before I retired, we had a plan in place. It was Aaron, Brendan, I think I had Jason Lezak and a couple people else on this, and it was the idea was a professional league, but my idea was never what ISL is looking at. My idea was always take the idea of the surfing professionals or tennis professionals or golf or anything like that. Make it a professional organization that these athletes own a part in, right? And so the way we were going to start it was as simple as it was in Austin. We were going to do our own meet where there's prize money, and some of these athletes were going to be putting in money. They're going to put money into the bucket, but all compete for it and own that event, right? We would all own that event together and then expand it from there and let it build. But that, I think, is the way it has to be done. It's got to be just like the Association of Surfing Professionals or whatever, those where they it's almost like a union. They own it. They create their own competitions. They control everything. That's the way to do it. That's the way it's the only way it's going to work. And that was always my frustration with ISL. I love ISL. I love the concept, but it just was not. There's just not enough there. It's gonna be swim centric, but it's got to be ownership from the. It's got to be the athletes putting it together.
Swimming has always struggled to break out of that 4-year cycle that it is in, and breaking it. It's the biggest sport one of the biggest sports in the Olympics, but keeping people's attention on the other. People always want to try to find I mean, Bobby's idea is as good of any as I've heard, right? And so, but you have these, people are trying to chip away and find a way to kind of make that happen again. And I would love that for the sport, but it's like the ever elusive. It's like it's pretty incredible how difficult it's been to do that. It's
I will say this too from the perspective of having been there and having done most of those contracts. Like there was a phase there of just excitement. Like this is new. This is the new shiny thing. The Olympics are here now for real. We're gonna make a ton of money. And so all these companies came in. We're throwing money at it. Well, eventually, every single company is going to start running their analytics. Well, they didn't run them in 96, 2000, 2004. They ran them in 2008, and that was supposed to be the biggest one ever. And when they ran the ROI, return on investment analytics, it didn't come back the way it should have. It was not worth what they were putting in it. And so instead of just kind of downgrading and trying to figure it out, they just left.
Yep.
That's wild.
So, yeah.
It seems like just the blood, sweat, and tears that go into the sport of the people who are the face of the sport, like people like yourselves and so many greats across the world through different generations who have, you talked about, Aaron, you talked about like people who blazed the trail and had to boycott swim meets and do all kinds of different things. And Bobby, you talked about the proverbial bubble that swimming was in 2008, but it is something that like there is so much there are so many amazing things happening with the sport, but it just doesn't seem like the athletes are compensated for what they're bringing to the larger committees that are making the money off of it. And I would love to see the people who built the brand of the sport, the faces that actually built it, be compensated for that. And so whether that's agencies, whether that's a professional swimming league, whether it's a profit share with, don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying this, the IOC and USA Swimming or whatever country you're in, just like they do with other professional sports league, because the people who are in the league bring in the money for the league. I just don't think you should have to live paycheck to paycheck as a professional representing your country. And, and I've never been in your guys' situation, and you guys did something amazing that I think everybody should be going after in the sport. There's nothing wrong with trying to compensate the people who are bringing in the money and doing great things for the sport. And I don't know if you guys agree or disagree, but that's just a thought I have as you guys are saying all that.
Well, I have the thought of like, the Olympics is however many billions of dollars that go into and come out of, right? And you have college sports, which is very much the same thing, and how that's changing, right? At the NCAA level with football and things like that. But how much effort it's taken to be able to like chip away at that armor, that those entities. I mean, you try and hold something like the IOC accountable, which sits in Switzerland and basically doesn't have to, there's nothing transparent that needs to happen from that side of it, right? I mean, they exist outside of that. And it's an international deal, and it's, I don't know how else I'll just, fine. It's like, FIFA got in trouble years ago. Kind of like, for, being the good old boys club that it was, and maybe it's cleaned up a little bit, but that's just all of those. There's so much money funneling through that. And really, I mean, what is at the end of the day, what is one way to go about it? We spoke about it earlier, like the athletes need to organize. And one of the, I mean, it's one of the hardest things to do. Other sports have done it. So Bobby mentioned like surfing and tennis and baseball, but that's what they had to do. Basketball, they literally had to kind of gather around, and they had to be the ones to say, we might be the ones to take a hit. It's incredibly hard to ask any generation to essentially do that, and to do it sincerely. Not, you might have an athlete say, okay, I'm willing to do it, but is their agent willing to do it? And are their parents willing to do it? Is the nucleus
Mm.
around that particular athlete willing to also, whatever,
Yeah.
it's a lot of money that they're
Yeah.
already getting, that they're going to lose out on, that the next generation will reap from potentially. But anyway, that's like one way that I see it. There's the Olympics. Sure, it exists out there in that capacity, or these big swim meets do, and there's always an argument for that. But it's like it's a constant fight. It's what NC2A is in the Olympics and all those big institutions that always right.
Yeah.
Had to fight.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Well, you guys have been so gracious with your time. We've gone from totally different topics from start to finish because you guys have just done, and we didn't even come close to covering everything I would have loved to, but that was phenomenal. And if we hope at Swimstrong Dryland and anybody watching this to have even a tenth of the impact that you guys have had on the swimming world, both in your time in the sport, business side of the sport, and now advocating for the sport in so many different ways. It's an honor to be on here with you guys, and thank you so much for your time and for everything that you've done.
Thanks for having us, Eric.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch a new episode each Monday. You can also check us out on social media at Swimstrong Dryland. If you would like to join the Swimstrong family, visit our website at swimstrongdryland.com.